I'm sure somebody will tell me. But regardless, all right, let's go ahead and get kicked off. Thanks everyone for joining. Hello, Pantheon Radio. I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Another night of news, highlights, and we're gonna have some lore tonight as well. So, hey, what about that? I've got the awesome and knowledgeable Temmi with me tonight. So, Temmi? Yeah. We've replaced Moll for tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and kick off tonight with a little announcement, guys. So, just so everyone's aware, Moll and his family had a house fire on this past Sunday and lost everything. So, while they're dealing with that and getting everything in order, we're going to continue on with the show, but we're going to bring in special guests such as Temmi tonight and others throughout the week to try to fill the void that we have for Moll as he and his family, you know, get things settled up. But with that news, you know, we have our best wishes and thoughts out to him and his family. I'm just glad they're okay and everything. But I'm going to, at the end of this video, I'm going to take this, post it to YouTube, and on the YouTube, within the description, I will make sure that I have a link to a GoFundMe for Moll and his family. So if anybody out there listening to this podcast over Pantheon Radio, or watching on the stream via Twitch, or listening to it later, watching it on YouTube, would care or would like to contribute to help out Muldoon and his family as they go through this, I'll make sure to provide a link so that you can help as you would like. But past that point, guys, we are going to continue on. Moll sends his best wishes, best regards, and you know, he's keeping his spirits up. I just want to let y'all know that guy's a trooper. He is a pure trooper. He's keeping spirits up, keeping contact with a lot of the guild, and just having a good, you know, trying to have a good time, trying to keep everybody's spirits up. That's really feeling bad for him right now as well. You know, he's staying strong. So really proud of him and, you know, what he's able to do. So again, I'll lead off with that, but I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. We've got some news. We got some highlights. Some things happened this week. I think the last stream we had was Wednesday of last week. So between a week ago, we've had 2 streams dropped. We had the newsletter on Wednesday, then 2 streams. We had a stream on Sunday and a stream on Tuesday. The stream on Sunday with CoCarnage, we've seen streams like that many times before. But again, it's great watching those. I mean, they are educational. CoCarnage always production quality. Great job on his behalf. The devs, I mean, it was a really well done, well put together, a well executed stream. A lot of great content and information dropped during the stream as well. Then last night, I don't know if everybody was able to stay up last night and watch Jim Lee and the devs, but I got to tell y'all, that was one of the most fun and entertaining streams I've been a part of and been able to watch in a long time. Those guys got in there, and I thought it was going to be, honestly, I thought it was going to be another CoCarnage stream. When we got in there, the devs kind of, you know, pointed things around, and we just, you know, we saw a little bit of the same content from a different, you know, player's perspective. No, Jim got in there and he was wanting to play, and he did, and he brought a few of his friends with him, and they had a blast, and it was spectacular to watch and be a part of. I laughed the entire night at some of the things they were doing. I was yelling at the screen, telling them to taunt or telling them to CC. It's like they weren't doing anything right, but at the same time, they were still laughing and having a great time. Loved it. So I didn't know, were you able to watch the streams? You were able to watch them, right?
Yeah, I watched the one with Co for sure, and the one with Jim Lee, the start time was actually after my bedtime. I'm working mornings now, which kind of sucks. So after it was delayed, I was like, ugh, I gotta get to sleep. So I was watching part of it throughout the day. I got like an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes in. It was hilarious. I loved it. I love seeing the passion.
Yeah, no. I made some clips from it myself, so I'll make sure to add those in the description as well for everybody that wants to watch this later down the road in YouTube and things like that. We've got some clips from the Twitch stream where Brad's going in the room, you know, pulling bosses before they're supposed to, and we've got Ronick showing up. So I don't know. I got to tell this story. I told Rumor, one of the other people that I know in Pantheon, I told her that I would make sure I mention this story. So for all that you don't know, Ronick is, he does things like, you know, the PR for Pantheon, the newsletter and things like that. And Ronick, before TwitchCon, was letting a few of us know that he was really nervous about streaming at TwitchCon and potentially dying. He didn't want to die on stream. That was like his biggest fear. I don't want to die on stream. I'm not a good tank. I'm not used to tanking. It's not my thing, but I'm going to tank at TwitchCon. I don't want to die on stream. Literally the very first fight that Ronick had, he dies. It was 30 seconds in. And then he spends like the next 5 minutes doing a corpse run. Everything went, it was terrible. So we've never let him down. We never, you know, hashtag never forget, all this stuff. We've been joking with him for God knows how long now. It's been a few months. Ronick last night on Jim Lee's stream, I was in tears from this. Ronick wasn't on the stream at all the entire time. Well, they at one point did a recall, or they summoned everybody, you know, all the devs and everybody that was in there. They summoned them all to one spot so they could all group up and go fight the end boss there. And they just so happened to summon Ronick as well. And I promise you, if you watch the stream, I'll get the clip for everybody that watches it. Ronick gets summoned and at least 25 seconds go by, and then all of a sudden you see him laying on the ground dead yet again. Wasn't involved in the stream for 2 hours, gets summoned, shows up on the stream for 20 seconds and dies. I mean, I know the back history behind that story, so when I saw it happen, I lost it. It was done. I was out. But it was a good time, and I just had to shout that out because I mean, I got a joke with Ronick. I mean, he's a great guy, you know, and he's just doing a lot for the community, I think, for the newsletters and stuff like that. I love what he's able to accomplish and do for us. So I always try to give him a hard time about stuff. But moving on past that, I am going to go ahead and try to get into some of this stream tonight instead of talking about, you know, what we've all witnessed over the last week. Even though it was really, really great information, really cool. I enjoyed the streams. I had a blast watching them, being a part of them. There's some things I want to go over tonight. And primarily that gets into lore and such, because as I've told Temmi, this guy is not very educated on anything. And I can't educate myself. I don't know what it is, but something doesn't work quite right. So I invited Temmi over here tonight to help me with that. And what I'm going to do now is let her introduce yourself, if you will, and let everybody know maybe where they can find you. I think I've got the YouTube link in the picture here. Yeah, there we go. So I've got TemmiTalks. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Sweet. Just recently named it, or got the name on the custom URL for YouTube. So if you want to find her, youtube.com/TemmiTalks. So I know that you did some streams way back when, and then you had a leave of absence, and now you're coming back into it full throttle, and I'm excited about it. But I wanted to kind of go back to the beginning when we talk about the lore and things, because I need to know an overview. I need some sort of understanding of where I can start when it comes to Pantheon lore, because it's crazy how it's set up. As we were talking about just a minute ago, it's so much information, and it's written in a way that, I mean, it takes somebody like Temmi and others that are scholars of this to read it and you know, interpret. But where should I start as somebody that's looking into lore? Like, what's the best place to start for me?
I think it's easy to get overwhelmed because it's a little bit of a different premise. I think the best way to start is just like get a really broad view of the lore and get an idea of some of the main themes and motifs you have going on with the universe. And then from there, you can just sort of say, okay, well, this is really interesting. Let me look into this a little bit more. And as you start finding things that are interesting to you, you sort of start to connect them until somehow in your mind, it makes this cohesive story.
So, okay. So I've watched your videos, and I've watched a few others, and I love what you've been able to do with the videos. Could you help me kind of get an overview? Like, if I'm looking at, I know that you talked about the before, for example. Mm-hmm. Can we just start there? Like, can you get like a brief overview of what this lore is like? Or here, let me start with this. I actually want to ask one question before you do that. Mm-hmm. What so far have you enjoyed the most about the lore? Like, what's the one thing that really draws you in more than anything? That's an off-the-wall question, and I know you weren't prepared for it, so.
Okay, so if you're talking about like a specific thing that I started reading and I was like, oh, I wanted to know more, it was definitely the Deicide War. I think it was really, really interesting. Like, it's a story that's kind of touched upon a lot, like gods warring with mortals. Like that's pretty common. but some of the nuance and some of the ways that it happened was just absolutely original and really, really interesting. And I found myself wanting to know so much more about Janavi and Itero and all these names that we're going to talk more about later, I'm sure. But I found myself wanting to learn about these gods, their motives, and all these different things. And it was this interesting clash because Terminus, the world, is planar. So what that means is that you have a lot of different planes that are overlapping in different ways. So in Terminus, it's not necessarily that you have access to all these other planes, but it's that all of the races and their gods were taken from other planets, possibly other universes. We don't know exactly. And that creates this like melting pot of cultures, races, gods, just everything that you usually would see in a planar premise. So I think that's the best way to label it right now, is as this planar universe. And that sort of culminated with this war where one of the gods was actually corrupted, and we don't know why or what. There's so many mysteries with it, which is what I think partially makes it so interesting. You have no idea why anything happened. You don't know why Itero was corrupted. You don't know if it was Terminus or his home planet. You don't know why Hathis Kevgrajal of the Archive defected. You don't know why Osari of the humans defected. Those are gods from other pantheons that had nothing to do with the original founder of the Deicide War, and they defected. You have no idea why. And well, I think that's part of the draw.
Well, okay. Hold on. So I'm going to get into this lore. I'm going to be reading through it, and I'm just going to be immersed into it. But at the end of it, I'm not going to know the answers.
Right.
Oh, perfect.
And
okay,
I think that
great.
makes for, if it was a book, I'd be furious. But it's not a book. It's an MMO that we're hoping is going to last for 20 plus years. So they have to have some mysteries. They have to have something to build off on. So every time there's like a side quest, I would be like, oh, this is finally going to explain why Terminus like grabs races from other planets and sucks them in. This is going to be it. And then it doesn't. I'm like, okay. So then the next quest or expansion comes along. I'm like, okay, this has to explain why the dragons left. And then it doesn't. And it just, it keeps you going the same way that like gear progression keeps you going.
Yeah.
If you're at maximum gear level, I mean, for the people that prioritize that, what are you playing for? So in the same, vein, if you know everything there is to know about the world, if you like the lore, what reason do you have? Just read the book.
So, okay. So I have to ask then, because as I understand it, the perception system is more along the line of the storyline of the game. That's the way that I interpret it. So I think of perception as the storyline continued throughout the game. I think of quest as kind of like jobs that you do within the game. So if I'm looking at, potentially a perception system or a quest, I mean, they're two different things in my mind. One's more the storyline, one's more a quest or a job that you're doing. Now, can they be combined or can they intertwine? Absolutely. There's definitely going to be ways that they intertwine. I'm 100% confident in that. But when thinking of just perception, if it is by my guess and estimate and what I believe, going to be more along the storyline where you're going to be kind of filling in the gaps that you're talking about, are you going to be a keeper?
Oh, absolutely. Like okay. On every character I ever make.
Okay.
So there was a question, and I'm trying to remember when this question came up. I don't remember exactly. It was in one of the recent streams with Co, maybe. And it was asked, is there a reason to not be a keeper? And the answer that was given was, well, it's the same answer to, is there a reason to not be a crafter? Not necessarily. There's not really a reason to not do it, except that it takes time away from the other activities you could be doing. So I do feel like being a keeper is something that most people will get into.
Yeah.
So I personally don't see any reason why you wouldn't do it. Hopefully there are incentives for all types of different play styles. Like hopefully you can just be a crafter and hopefully you can just explore and experience a lot of the world. But I don't really personally see a reason why you wouldn't be a keeper unless there's some ridiculous gold sink involved, which I don't think there is.
Well, so on that note, I mean, I plan on being a keeper myself, but I need to know why I'm going to be a keeper. So let's start there. What am I trying to fill in to start with?
So let me just back up a little bit because you had asked for like a brief overview, and I think that we should start with that and then sort of get sidetracked from there. So the just like a really, really eagle's eye overview. The before, or at least that's what it's kind of being called right now. We don't really have so much information, as I'm sure you guys know. So the before is just sort of before the eras of collision. So we have experienced 3 eras of collision so far, and each one brought we've experienced 4 eras of collision. All of them brought at least 1 race. Most of them brought 3. So the before is before any of that stuff happened. So there are dragons in the sky, there are dragons of the sea, and they are sort of not necessarily foes, but they're definitely different sides of this equation going on, this equation of power in the world. Some terms you might have seen are like Nistarak. That was the original name for the planet before it was called Terminus. And it was also at some point called Avozul, although we don't really know too much about that. It's been called a lot of different things, which sort of coincides with this planar theme. Like different forces have had power over Terminus as time has gone on. We don't even know if the dragons were really the first race to have ultimate power. We don't know. So the before is just everything before the most recent 987 years. The world, like at launch, starts year 987, Ithos Bryn Hegelen, which is the new calendar that starts at the end of the before. So the before is everything before the eras of collision. The dragons rule the sky. There's one big bad evil dragon. He kills the king of the sea dragons, and then he kills his own father, who is the king of the sky dragons, becomes the king of all the dragons, and then the dragons go away.
All right. So, okay, let me make sure I got that real quick. So before anything ever happens, we've got dragons that are just roaming around Terminus and just taking over. And
as far as I know.
Okay. And so we've got some in the air, some in the sky. And did you say one of the dragons in the air came down and, killed the one in the... Okay, so we have one in the air. I'm sorry, I said one in the air. One in the air, one in the sea, right? I said one in the air, one in the... Okay, so we've got air and sea. And one in the air comes down, kills one in the sea, and then goes up and kills his dad, and then takes over, and then they scatter.
Right. And that's the first big mystery. Okay, well, I say first big mystery. There's like a million mysteries before any of the mysteries that we think are relevant. Like, where did the dragons come from? Are they the first people? Are they like the native people of Terminus? Who renamed the planet so many times? Why do other races come to Terminus? Like, there's so many questions. But the first one that's kind of largely, hugely relevant, why do the dragons leave?
So I'm already confused, but we're gonna keep going. So
okay, great.
Let me go ahead.
It's very, very confusing, and this is why I was so inspired to start my YouTube series, because I wanted to make the lore more accessible. So, like, when you read it, and I think it's also really interesting because the lore on the website is also written from a lens. It's not just this objective third-person perspective. It's written by someone. And it even, at some points, breaks in almost Deadpool-esque. And he's like, now why did this happen? We don't know. And it's like, that's not helpful. You're supposed to be omniscient. So it is really hard to digest all of this.
Okay, so let's keep going. So we got the dragons, the big bad dragon. What's his name, by the way, that killed everybody?
Rochnilthamos.
Rochnilthamos. Okay, that's going to be a mouthful. I'll say that one 10 times fast.
Confirmation from our lead lore writer. That is actually the proper pronunciation.
Oh, okay, great.
I guessed. I got it right. I'm sorry.
That's better. I would have went with Rock myself. So we've got Rock, and I'm sure there's like 10 of them, but we'll say that. So Rochnilthamos comes down and takes down not only the I guess the leader of the sea dragons, but the leader of the air dragons as well, his dad. Okay, so this dude's a bad dude. Okay, so I got it. So
Yes.
this dude's a bad dude. All right, so let's keep going with that. So he takes over, and then so he takes over and everybody scatters. Boop,
yes.
Gone.
Well, we don't know if the dragons scatter because of him.
Oh.
Or
okay.
because of something else. Chronologically, the next big thing that happens after that is the writing of the Dragon Accord, also called the Celestial Boundary. So it's very shortly after that, or sort of in tandem with the writing of that the dragons scatter. So the Celestial Boundary, we know a little bit about what it does. We don't know exactly who wrote it, but we have some good guesses. But it's easiest to just describe it by what it does. So it is literally a boundary between the celestial and the mortal. So we see this highlighted a couple times later in the history of Terminus, where, for example, with the dwarves, one of the dwarven gods wants to destroy the dwarves. And he can't until he descends past the celestial boundary. Like it is literally a wall that blocks off almost all connection between the celestials, like the divines, and the mortals.
Okay, so this is separating the gods more or less from the mortals, the regular Joe Schmo. So, you know, little old sacred down here on Earth can't talk to anybody because I got this stupid boundary up. Okay.
Right.
Okay, great. So what's I mean, you said that this was created?
Yes, it was created. We don't know by whom. However, we do have some pretty good guesses. For example, if on the website you've read the keepings of things, it's basically missives between Nerian Castigue and Kaolin Greyborn. There are these two researchers trying to learn more about this exact thing, the Celestial Boundary, the Dragon Accord. And they do discover sort of one big telling thing. It's written in Drac Elrin, which is the language of the Dragon King himself and only he. That means that the Dragon Accord must have been written by a Dragon King or someone that knew the tongue of the Dragon King, which that should be only the Dragon King. But it could be like the crazed chancellor that we see in every, you know, fantasy story. We don't know for sure.
All
but
right,
there is a very, very good chance that it was written by a Dragon King.
So my question is, how good is a language if only you can read it?
You know, that is a very good question. I think it is the language of the Dragon King because it's so powerful. So, like, Nerian Castigue and Kaolin Greyborn, they actually do some tests on this document, and they find that even parts of the document rewritten in the Dragon King tongue cannot be destroyed. So it is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So it could just be used as a way to preserve the history of the dragons, or maybe like their prophecies, their legends. I mean, as to how useful it really is, I mean, I don't know, but there definitely is some use in this language that's so powerful that nothing can destroy it.
Well, I guess my thought is maybe you said that, so a Dragon King, I'm assuming if there's a new Dragon King, then they would be able to read it. So maybe it's a way of passing down information between them that's in kind of a, I guess you could say, hidden language, so that they're the only ones that are able to fully understand it. Okay, I can kind of catch on to that. Okay, cool.
Okay.
I won't stop. I'll try not to stop you anymore, but I can't promise. It's probably going to be 30 seconds. I'm going to add another question.
Yeah,
so.
I don't believe you at all. So after we have the Dragon Accord, that sort of sets the stage for these eras of collision. So the eras of collision, I guess literally it would be other races colliding with Terminus. I'm not sure that's a very accurate term, but each era of collision correlates to races being plucked from other planets, maybe even other universes or other existences, and deposited onto Terminus. So there's about 15 questions wrapped up in that, like,
Yeah.
where does the rest of the planet go? What is it that takes the races and their gods? Because presumably, if it's taking this entire race and their gods, it must then be stronger than those gods. What singular thing about Terminus is stronger than an entire pantheon of gods that it's plucking them and pulling them onto Terminus? We don't know. That's going to be the underlying theme to this whole narrative. We don't know. So to skip past a lot of the minutia of, the dwarves came in this year, the ogres came in this year. So each era of collision brings different races. And at one point, one of the races that is brought to Terminus is the Jinto, and they are by nature a good race, but their god king is corrupted. That is Etero. He's corrupted. We don't really know by what, of course, just more questions. He's corrupted, and he wants to more or less conquer the world, destroy the world, burn the world, whatever. We don't exactly know what his end game is, because again, this part in particular is told through a lens. So we don't know what the other characters are thinking. All we see is what the character that's writing the story sees. So he sees this madness, and he has some tales from other people, but again, through a lens. And Etero launches the Deicide War, which is the thing that I'm most personally interested in. It's this huge war between Etero, who is a god, and he also corrupts a few other gods, versus the mortals. Now, normally the gods and mortals can't really interact, but the gods can descend past the celestial boundary, but they have to give up their godhood to do it. So the one thing that it does sort of tell us is that there is no way for a god or a greater deity to impact the mortal world. To descend past the celestial boundary, they have to give up their godhood.
So we're talking about the boundary again. We've got the boundary there. Mm-hmm. So we've got the gods on their side, we got humans on their side, or mortals, whatever you want to call it, on their side. And then for these gods to come join the mortals or interact with them in any way, shape, or form, assumably they have to cross this boundary. And by doing so, they're giving up their, they're giving up their Hercules juice, if you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And they're coming down to be mortal. Or what was the word? High mortal?
Yeah, they're called high mortals. They aren't quite mortals, but they're no longer immortal either. We don't know all of the details about high mortals, but we do know that they are still incredibly long-lived. Kazis actually descended of his own free will. He was the creator and one of the primary gods for the dwarves. He descended of his own free will to live with the dwarves and to guide them as their king. And he's been around for a pretty sweet, 982 years. So clearly they are not mortal either.
Okay, so I'm getting the gist that they can die, just probably not by natural causes.
Yes. So that would be my assumption as well, because obviously they can't be completely godly anymore. They gave that up. So just continuing with the Deicide War, Etero corrupts one of the human gods and one of the Archai gods to fight with him, and they launch this three-pronged attack, one huge force on each of the main continents, and they would have succeeded in destroying or purging the entire planet if not for the War Wizards, the hack class that Brad played in the first.
Yeah, you talking about Brad? Brad showed up and
the flaming swords. Yeah, that's a War Wizard.
Great.
So at the time, 6 of the playable races were there. All of the races except and let me say this right, all of the races except for the halflings, the Scar, and the gnomes were on Terminus. So
Okay.
there is one war wizard as a representative of each of the other 6 playable races. So there's one human war wizard, one elven war wizard, one one dwarven war wizard, one Archai war wizard, one Mer war wizard, and one ogre war wizard.
Okay.
And this is another huge mystery. Where'd they come from? Who are they? Are they mortal? Are they high mortal? We don't know, but they come around and they manage to help mortal kind push back Itero and his forces, though not without losses, of course. I think 2 of them die. And after that, they disappear.
All right. So first we got the dragons. First we got the dragons who decide that they want to just kind of up and run, and then we got these war wizards who come by and just slay some bodies, and they're like, okay, we're done, we're good, we're gonna go hide out in, you know, I don't know, tropical island somewhere. So we've got both these massive, potentially devastatingly powerful dragons that are somewhere hidden or somewhere, and also potentially war wizards somewhere as well. We don't know where they're at. Is that what I'm getting the gist of?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe I'll run into them.
Maybe. So
Okay.
one of the other big events in the history of Terminus is after the end of the Deicide War, after the war wizards leave, the celestial boundary is strengthened. So before, several gods and goddesses were able to descend and become high mortals and sort of cheat the system. Like, that's not really what it was intended to do. So again, we don't know who strengthens the celestial boundary, but after the conclusion of the Deicide War, it's strengthened. And as far as we know, there are a lot of mysteries. So if there's one thing about the lore, is that I don't take anything as law, because there are so many intentional mysteries that I also sort of have to believe that there are going to be some other mysteries as well, even though it may not seem like it's an unknown. So just because no other dissensions have been mentioned doesn't mean there have not been any. But since the end of the Deicide War, as far as we know, there have been no dissensions. So there have been no more gods that descended to become high mortals.
Okay. So, okay, so someone came by, strengthened this wall to a point where not even the gods themselves that we know of can cross it now.
Right.
So back to that thing you said earlier where somebody potentially maybe brought them to Terminus or pulled them, or they had a reason to come there. And we're thinking potentially there's somebody of even a higher power at work here. You know, controlling things, pulling the strings, maybe strengthening the boundary, pulling the gods and their people to Terminus.
Maybe.
Okay, I'm digging it.
There ostensibly has to be something that is more powerful than an entire pantheon of gods pulling the strings in Terminus. Now, what that is could actually be really, really interesting. So it could be something that's less of a who and more of a what. Like, it could simply be a force of nature, something that is not actually sentient in any way. It could be, you know, in that vein, it could be similar to like the life stream, if you've ever played some of the Final Fantasy games. So the life stream is not really sentient, it is simply a force of nature. But it is a force of nature that is so strong that it literally defines the world. So I try to keep an open mind, because one thing that I think is really dangerous, just in general, not even just with lore, and I don't want to get too philosophical or anything, but when you believe something and when you don't leave yourself open to other interpretations, you become closed-minded and you can miss a lot of other even better opportunities. So I try to not, like, I think that it probably is an entity, something like huge and crazily powerful,
Sacred.
Maybe
I
the
get
person
it.
who created the universe in the first place. We don't know, but it might not be. So I try to just train myself down and say, no, keep an open mind. There could be a lot more going on than, just your first instinct. So.
Nice. Okay. As Day said here, a paladin. Day, buddy, I know that you're here every time, and paladin is probably not it. So I'm sorry, guys. It's a bad joke. I know everybody listening on the radio doesn't understand it, but every time that I stream, Day's in here wanting to hear more about the paladin. So, anyways, carry on. Okay, so let me recap real quick. So we got the dragons. They decide to eat themselves, or I'm sorry, we got the one dragon who kills Pop of the Sea and Pop of the Air, and then he takes over. They scatter. We've got this massive war that undertakes later down the road, and we've got these war wizards that come. They basically clean up house, and then they scatter or go wherever they go. We don't know where. And now we've got this enforced boundary, this enforced wall that's separating potentially our gods from our mortals as well. And all of this comes with 1,000 more questions of why and who and what. So what is next? Like what are we going to be looking at? Are we to the part now where we're getting to where we come into the picture, or are we not even there yet?
Yes.
Oh.
So honestly, after the Deicide War, there's one more era of collision, which brings in the halflings, the Scar, and the gnomes, the three that weren't made into war wizards. And that is all 9 of the playable races. And really, after that last era of collision, there are not that many big events. So
things settle down.
So interestingly enough, I'm sure other people have realized this, but the eras of collision have been about every 300 to 400 years. It's been 300, or I'm sorry. Yeah, it's been 367 years since our last era of collision. So VR has really set themselves up perfectly for an expansion with 3 more races. And I love when I notice these things from like a thematic standpoint, like, all right, so this is a pattern. Oh, they've set this up. Or like another big one is there was this evil deity, Razak the Rageful, and he was locked away for 1,000 years in like the double-digit years. So we're starting at 987. So if he was locked away for 1,000 years, that could be like a huge expansion as well, like where he's released early for good behavior or something. I love seeing little things like that. Once you really get into the nitty-gritty of like the years that things happen, there's so much amazing stuff that is being set up. And the more you dig into the lore, the more you start to see it.
Well, hold on. You said release for good behavior. He's been in there for what, 900 years?
Listen, I mean, I don't know.
Come on, like, jeez.
Or I mean, probably much more believably, maybe as it gets closer to his term, the like bonds that are holding him are starting to weaken. So maybe he can, break free more so than be released early. But yeah, so those are really all the big events. There's so much that we could talk about, but I think that starts to get into the really hard to digest stuff. Like the info dump, you start to lose the big picture. So I think it would probably be a little bit more useful to talk about where that leaves us as we are going to be playing the game.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I think is really, really interesting that Pantheon has a lot different from a lot of other universes, there's not much religion going on.
There's not much what now? I'm sorry.
Religion.
Okay.
Because we're the gods, and they haven't been around for 300 plus years. So when the race class combinations were first released, people were upset because, for example, elves couldn't be clerics nor paladins. Cleric and paladin are the 2 classes that have sort of been confirmed are definitely religion related. We don't know all of the details or what that might mean. But in the cleric like detail page, it says that they don't really have communication with their gods. And they haven't for a long time. So the official VR response to the lack of elven clerics was, well, because of what's happened with the elves, they aren't really religious. So it doesn't make sense for them to be clerics. And actually the races that can be clerics and paladins are pretty limited. So I definitely think that a big reason for that is because the world itself just is not influenced very much by gods of any kind.
Okay. So, all right. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this still. So we've got what you said. A lot of the gods have come down and become high mortals, or some form of that.
A good handful of them, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we've put in. I'm assuming that some of them have died already, or I have something. Are they just out there wandering around?
So several of the gods that descended used their life force to perform miracles that they were incapable of enacting on the wrong side of the boundary. So, for example, Ganavi is sort of the first one that comes to mind. She was the wife of Itero, who was the benefactor or initiator of the Deicide War. She descended, and with her descension, she performed a miracle that blessed her people to be able to fight Itero's forces. And that we see that very, very similar thing happen several other times. So it happens twice with the Myr. Two of their gods descend to perform miracles to try and save the Myr from this new environment they were previously incapable of surviving in. So most of the high mortals actually sacrificed themselves to perform these miracles that they could not perform before descending because of the celestial boundary.
Okay, I like that. So basically, I'm hearing that the gods or celestials, they have care for their people. Like, even though they were brought to this strange land, maybe against their will or maybe because they wanted to, they still appear, for the most part, to care about their people and want to make sure that they're being taken care of. So a lot of them are sacrificing themselves to make sure that their people continue to survive and thrive.
Right.
Okay.
And
like
it's
that.
only since the end of the Deicide War that hasn't been possible. So beforehand, the races might have had communion with their gods. They might have felt the impact of their gods' blessings. And after the end of the Deicide War, nothing. So over the past 370-something years, a lot of the belief has just sort of waned.
Okay.
So I think that's one really interesting thing. There are going to be a lot of more unique motivations for people besides religion.
So, okay. Yeah, so I know that religion in a lot of games has been a very, very big piece of the games themselves. So what, we're seeing is maybe it's not quite as big here, or maybe it is, who knows? We don't know exactly. But I'm interested to see more about what this boundary means now that we have this, I guess, solid wall built versus what we kind of had, which was a loose gate before. And now that we've been, 367 years, you said? Since the last age?
I have this written down, I swear.
I know, I go off topic, guys. Y'all don't have a clue, but
okay.
I didn't prepare for this at all.
Year 622, the celestial boundary is strengthened, and it's currently 987. So that's 365.
Okay, so 365.
Right? Oh God, I hope I said that right.
I'm not doing the math right now. I'm just going to keep going with it. So, but again, so we've got 300 plus years, 350 plus years, whatever it is, where we've had basically the last big event until now. And then potentially what we're looking at is maybe in the near future, a new age. And what we've seen is with these new ages usually comes some sort of significant events at times. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm catching on. I mean, again, I got the dragons in the air, the sky. I've got the war wizards. I've got this massive war that took place with the war wizards there. Everybody then scattered. They're all over or not all over. I don't know. And then at the same time, I've got the guys who have been locked up in the closet, and we no longer get to play, you know, outside with them anymore. So I don't really get to talk to them or interact with them. And then not only that, most of them have died at this point, or some of them have died at this point. So, you know, they're not even around anymore, even if we could get through the boundary. A lot going on here. I mean, I'm going to break it down as simply as I can, which is I'm just going to have to continue watching your videos to catch up more of this, because so guys, I'm going to go ahead and kind of say this, which is, well, actually, before I say that, is there anything you want to kind of wrap up with? Anything that can kind of wrap this up, or is that a good stopping point to where we kind of come into the picture and become, I guess you could say, involved in the world of Terminus?
I think that's a pretty good stopping point.
Okay.
The last thing that I think I just want to sort of reiterate is that it is a planar premise, which is really interesting, because what that means is each individual race was the hero of their own story before they get to Terminus. So that means that each race has much more unique and distinct flavor and culture than what you would see from a non-planar premise.
Oh, okay. So I guess what you're telling me is no one of the, like, these are the all-stars, and we've brought them all to one place, and they've got their own great story behind them.
Like Spaceballs.
Like Spaceballs. Okay, I'm on track now. We're good, guys. All right, so that's it. We're going to go ahead and close it down. It's clear now. No, that's okay. I get it. I mean, so for me, what I'm looking at is, you know, the big picture of when I step on Terminus for the first time. I mean, so for you, if you were looking at me and I told you I wanted to play a certain race, for example, and when I'm playing that race, is there any one thing that I should really do before I start the game to really get myself kind of prepared, like for any of the perceptions that may come up or any of the storylines that I may come across or something like that? Like, reading the lore for that particular race is good, but is there anything additional to that, or is that just really the only place we have to start right now?
I mean, unfortunately, that's just about all we have right now.
Okay.
Hopefully, and it sounds like this is the course they're taking, hopefully the mechanics will match the lore in a lot of ways. So, and by that, I mean, hopefully you'll be able to look at a race like the dwarves, and they're supposed to be very hardy, and they're supposed to love a good fight and, you know, these rowdy behaviors, but they're also very, very, very highly renowned enchanters. So hopefully you'll be able to look at different stats, maybe their racial abilities, maybe their starting stats, or their starting quests or something, and you'll be able to get a good idea of a little bit of the lore for that race.
Okay. Okay.
But right now, the race page is just about all we have.
All right. So for me, being the dumb guy that I am, you know, I always have these, I made a joke the other day. I called them sacred questions, and somebody corrected me and said there's no sacred questions, only sacred answers. And I was like, I really like that. I'm going to steal that. However, it's not true in the least bit, because I never have an answer to anything. So for me, when looking at this, I get the gist of it. I get the general idea of it. But what you're saying is this is just kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Like, we're just getting like breadcrumbs here as far as the lore goes. And even that, there's still more on the site. There's still more out there that we can absorb lore wise. So for me, I'm going to need help with this. Are you going to be doing videos and YouTube, you know, stories on a lot of this going up, or where can I find more of this information?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm excited because I did just get my custom URL for YouTube. So it's youtube.com/TemmiTalks. I have a couple of videos there from about a year ago, and then life decided to, you know, commit horrible, horrible things to me. But I am back now. I really, really like doing the digestible bite-sized pieces. So my videos aren't usually that long. I like to keep them pretty focused. So a lot of the things that I'm working on now are sort of overviews of some broader things. Like, for example, I really want to talk about some of the AI. I've made videos about the Dragon Accord and the Divines, things like that. So I have a lot of videos in the works that I'm working on the scripts for like broader projects. But then I also, over the past 2 years that I've been following this, I've accumulated a lot of information about specific things like Halnir Cave and the Cult of 582 and some of the smaller, less known things like that. Or this, they dropped this bomb about Celestium ore. And I'm like, okay, you can't just say something like Celestium ore in a world where the Divines are so important and not give me more. So now I have this document going on about Celestium ore. So there definitely will be a lot of things that are eagle-eye view, broader. And then I also, as time goes on, I'm going to be doing a lot more specific ones too. But yes, lots more videos.
Awesome. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and favorite that and make sure that I'm on track with everything coming out. I recommend anybody else in my boat when it comes to intelligent, IQ level, you probably want to favorite that as well. Just a heads up. But I will say, so I have been able to listen to some of your videos and I love the way that you put them in short, condensed, very direct, straightforward. Like this was a conversation. I have 1,000 questions. I'm holding back the best I can, but even then I have to ask some of them and they're not intelligent at the least bit. But at the same time, trying to wrap my mind around this it's fun to me because there's just so much in-depth knowledge there that I think Justin, the writer, has done a tremendous job with the lore. And I'm not one that normally gets into lore. I've said that a couple times now, but I'm usually one that just kind of skips over storylines and is like, how do I win the game? I don't really care what this person's here for. I just want to know, how do I kill them? So, for me, lore has never been a big thing, but for Pantheon's sake, and from what I've experienced so far, it's really been a lot more interesting to me. And I don't know if it's just because of the time that I've gotten into Pantheon, before I can play the game, before I can get into it. But now I've had to kind of dive into the lore because it's really the only thing I have out there and I'm loving it. I'm enjoying it. But my comprehension of it is still, it's just, I'm not there. So I'm going to have to learn from people like you and others that are really out there helping me out on YouTube. So I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me and trying to work through some of my questions because I know they can be mind-boggling at times. And just for everyone out there, just so you know, so I prepared her none for this, and I know that's not the proper English, but I gave her no warning really of what I was going to ask or how I was going to ask it. I came in here fresh, and I tried to catch her off guard. Honestly, I was like, man, maybe I can stump her, and obviously that's not happening tonight. So we'll figure some other questions out later because mine are just not there. But, for somebody like you, you seem to just absorb this knowledge. Like you said, when the Celestial Ore, when that reference came out, it immediately triggered something. And you were like, wait, where does that fit? How does that work? Where does that intertwine within the lore itself? How does that, all fit together? Where's the bigger picture of that? For me, that was just like, oh, it's a type of ore. All right, cool. So, again, I have to look at it differently. So I'm trying to find that balance, and I think you're helping me out, and I appreciate that. And for all those out there that are hopefully watching your videos and things, I'm hoping that those short, condensed, sweet videos that you do will be just what we need to really get us through over the hump of that learning curve. We're running out of time here, and I wish I could ask a million more questions, but for now, I'll leave on one question. I named my guild Reignborn, and I've tried to dig through the lore to figure out how I can incorporate my guild name and the idea that we're a guild or a group with the same name that the dragons had in the early existence, because that's what the dragons were referred to, was it not? The dragon kind, Reignborn?
Yes, at least the higher dragons. There may have been lower castes too.
Okay, so yeah, we're top tier. We're not, yeah, we're good.
Right. So I was going to say that might actually be something that you can borrow from, the Reignborn dragons were this upper tier. So maybe it's this reference that your guild is of the highest quality, Well,
I don't know about that, but we'll go with it. Okay, so I'll have to say this. I put a request out to you. Could you help me figure out how I could do that, and we'll talk more about it later. But I'm gonna bug you about that one, because that one's gonna be a tough one for me. So we'll talk about that one later. Speaking of later, we are getting to the end of the show, guys, and I'm gonna go ahead and kind of wrap it up here. Temmi, I can't thank you enough for jumping on here. It was very educational for me. Like I said, I've watched your videos. I've tried to understand the lore the best I can. I've tried to read it myself. But sitting here and able to answer or ask questions and have you answer them and kind of like break it down to me, you know, into my terms, we'll call them sacred terms, because I think sacred versus stupid makes it just makes for better conversation. So breaking them down into my terminology and really helping me out. I'm hoping that it helps others out as well. This was completely unscripted, but at the same time, you came in here and just completely blew the doors off. So thank you so much for jumping on with us, hanging out with us tonight. Dropping some of this immense knowledge that you have on the Pantheon lore. And, you know, I just can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. I'm hoping that later down the road, we can pull you back in here and have some actually difficult questions for you. We'll try to set something up that's a little more fun and see where we can stump you or not.
Oh, no, now it's a time.
Oh, yeah. We'll definitely get that going. So I'll have to look to the audience to see if I can help out with some questions there. But speaking of that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you go find Temmi online, and that's at youtube.com/TemmiTalks, and that's a TEMMI Talks. So make sure you check that out. I'll have the link in the description of the YouTube video as we post that up here in a little bit as well. And again, if anybody has any questions about the lore or wants to know more, I have found that, you know, Temmi is readily accessible in almost every form, and she's awesome. So make sure you reach out to her, you know, give her a good word. And again, just make sure you subscribe to her YouTube channel, because I'm sure that's going to be the only thing that saves me when it comes to the lore of Pantheon, you know, in the future here. Any last words, any, you know, saving items? Hopefully this wasn't too bad. All right, cool. Speechless. That's how we leave them, guys. But all right, well, that's it for tonight. We'll go ahead and close it down. I appreciate everyone hanging out with us tonight, and we will be back on Friday night, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to go ahead and shut down Pantheon Radio, and thanks everybody for joining and hanging out with us. All right, so